This old bird is now taking centre stage. I think she looks quite good. In fact, I think it's her best home yet. Originally, she was plucked from my flock. Then she went into the container, but down at ground level in a baseless pot. And so then I lifted her, and I did hear the roots cracking as we pulled her up, because she had been sitting here for 6 to 9 months or so, so she had really started to root down. And then I jacked her up, and to do this I got a metal cylinder made that was exactly the height necessary for the height of the cylinder and the baseless pot to be just at the top of the tree seat. And then I filled the cylinder with soil, and then the baseless pot went on top of the soil. So now the top of the pot is pretty much flush with the top of the seat. I've thought of many different reincarnations of this space over the years. Originally, I thought I might have a lovely big old stone water trough, as would be befitting for a farmyard which would have had cattle in the past. But I couldn't find one, and actually they're quite high maintenance. You'd have to keep topping it up with water, etc., etc. Then I thought a grass-free lawn would be lovely, but it's quite a job actually sowing all the different trays of seed, and the maintenance is quite high. So then when the tree seat came available, I thought that would be a great answer, which is a prototype of ones I had made up for another job which weren't quite right. The U obviously hides the metal cylinder, but it doesn't yet hide the hessian that I've put on top of the black plastic pot to hide it. But it will do. I reckon in about 2 years the U will be up here at the back of the seat. I'll clip it so it is inside these bars, so it forms a lovely back to the seat, and it totally hides the pot. I think she works really well. I love giving her that extra bit of height, and I'd always thought perhaps that tree seats needed something really big to make them look substantial enough to fit into something like that. But now I'm thinking, no, I think that actually works really nice being a smaller scale, especially as we've got these lovely big trees all around her. I'm stripping off all the turf which we've killed, and that's going into the new rose meadow, and then I'm taking off the topsoil, and that's going to a project I've got going on round the back. Then I'm going to replace it all with Breedon Gravel, which I've also got in the walled garden, which I love, but I'm using it slightly differently here. I'm going to compact it as it comes up in paths to the tree seat and all the way around the tree seat, but I'm going to leave the Breedon Gravel loose, not compacted at all, around the edges in quite an informal way. And then I'm going to plant that gravel fairly heavily with gravel loving plants. There'll be sun loving, drought loving plants, and it will be fun to choose them. Probably quite different plants I'll choose than I've grown in other gravel areas around here, just to ring the changes. I love tree seats because they're really a focal point. They're useful, and they really elevate whatever plant they surround. And because they're highly useful, you can have several people, groups of people around them, sitting on them, and lots of conversations going on at the same time. We've made them from all different things. We've made DIY ones, just using plywood cutouts to form the top and the bottom, and then sticking them together basically with a very thin ply to go around the edge, so it looks like one big solid layer of timber, and then just resting them on concrete balls that look like stone. They're also good if you rest timber or plywood tree seats on top of box balls. That's quite an inexpensive way to do it, and obviously the box balls don't actually hold up the seat, but you can hide bits of timber underneath the seat and put the box balls in front, so it looks as though the box balls doing the work, but they aren't really. We've made all different designs of wood and metal, woven tree seats, which are always fun, doing an outer circle, weaving it, and then an inner circle, and then filling those two bits with earth, and then putting grass or thyme or something on the top. Obviously you need space around the trunk with those, that you don't want to put the soil right up to the tree trunk, otherwise you would kill them. I remember being marked down at Chelsea and told that tree seats were bad because they weren't very convivial. But since then, I've been using them all the time because I think they are. I think they're wonderful things, and I will continue to use them more and more. But I think probably in about 6 months or so, something like that, it will have really taken shape and really start to come into its own. And I think then I'll have really put this space to bed. I don't think I'll do another change on it, but you never know with me. This is my courtyard garden where I've got quite a bit of gravel. This is quite different gravel from the Breedon Gravel, which we're using on the other side. This is loose gravel. And I love using gravel because if I'd made all this area paving, it would look pretty hard. But by having the gravel triangles around the edge, I think it just softens the whole picture. And I like it because you can seed things in it, you can grow things in it. So it's sort of soft and sort of hard. It's a lovely mixture between the two. The paving too is slightly colonised by plants. I've just got sort of 10mm joints here, less than ½ an inch, and I have let the odd thing grow in here, which I like, but quite different to how Prince Charles has his paving. When I was writing the book with him on Highgrove, he pointed out that he makes his joints about 25mm wide, that's a good inch, and he fills them with soil and sand and compost and a bit of cement maybe, and then he actually seeds them, or he lets things seed into the joints. And in some of his paved areas you can hardly see the paving at all at certain times of year. It's just rammed full of crocuses in early spring, and then all different things come along like camasias and all sorts, and so it looks really, really soft. I like a wee bit more structure, and so I just let the odd thing creep into my joints, but the weeds are pulled out. But I'm going to show you my top 5 plants for gravel planting. I mean, I've probably got a top 50, but these are the 5 which I use most of all. And number 1 would have to be this, Stipa gigantea. Okay, it's as common as muck, we all love it, but that's because it's such a beauty. It's got this fabulous airy feel to it, and as you can see from the top, the heads, it is the wild oat grass, giant oat grass, and it really does just look beautiful, I think, and it will stay on looking good. These plumes will probably look good August, September, October, November sometimes, depending on the wind. And then when they look tatty, you just cut them back. So it's easy to maintain. Hopefully it will have dropped a few seeds first, so you'll get the odd seedling coming up. Some people say it's invasive, but I've never found it so. I really wish it would be more invasive, in fact. If I want to propagate it and it hasn't sown seeds, then I'll just take little Irishman's cuttings, just take little plantlets off the side when it gets to a certain size, and then I'll transplant them. And that's a very good way to propagate it if you want to. And then in the springtime, I might just comb through with a gloved hand and pull out the dead bits, and then the green bits grow back looking lush and lovely. But you do see a good winter presence with the tufts at the bottom, unless it's a really, really hard winter, sort of below -12, and then it probably does disappear from sight. But it is definitely one of my favourites. I've used it on lots of jobs and I will continue to use it. I don't think I'll ever become bored of its overuse, because it is hugely popular, because it's just one of those things that we all love. Number 2 is probably Helleborus crosssternii. Now, it is looking at its most manky that ever gets now, I would say, so it's just got its leaves. But what I love about this plant is all through the winter months, the foliage looks fantastic with these sort of purplish, pinkish, reddish stems and the very green, almost glaucous leaves. And then it flowers. It probably flowers from about November, December through the winter with beautiful sort of pink or yellow or purplish flowers. They're slightly varied on each seed strain, I think. And then they last right the way through until about March or April, by which time then you cut down the dead flower stalks, which will be fairly high, and then you'll leave the basal foliage to come up and to look fresher. Always when you cut the dead or dying flower head of a plant, whether it's something like hellebore or Bergenia or cephalaria, which I'll come to in a minute, as soon as you cut the dead head off, the foliage just whoomps into life and looks fresher. Even if it's looked fairly fresh before, it looks so much better. And that is simply because you're removing the flower head. It's no longer going to try and set seed and propagate, and so the leaves take all the energy and nutrients, and it is a really good thing to do if you've got the time to deadhead many things, unless of course you're wanting to keep the dead flower head for interest, or the seed, you're trying to get the seed. But these will seed so much anyway. Even if you leave one little head somewhere, you will get many plants. It really does seed freely. So that's another good attribute, but it can become a mite invasive, but it's so easy just to rip out. I think it's a much underused plant, this one, unlike the sniper. I don't know why it's underused. I think people think that hellebores maybe are too deciduous, but this is a good evergreen plant. All through even quite tough winters, it keeps those wonderful leaves. My third favourite is Euphorbia merzonitis. Now this plant, I love it, but I have to issue it with a warning, because if you touch it in sunlight, and with me, even in dull conditions, because I've now built up such a reaction to it, you come up with a massive blisters on your skin. And what's more, if you cut it and get the white sap typical of euphorbias in your eye, it really can send you into A&E double quick. So do be careful with it because of those factors, but otherwise I think it's fabulous. So I treat it with caution, with great respect now. And with all these allergies, the more that you touch them, the more allergic you can become, just like with bee stings and wasp stings. But it's evergreen, which is another reason why I love it, because I hate it when gravel areas look really dull and full of dying foliage in the winter, but this doesn't. It always looks perky, it always looks great. It's got these wonderful limey colour flowers all over it in early spring, and they last for a good while. They'll last for a good couple of months, and then when they go over, they have these seed heads which are fairly attractive, and it seeds everywhere, as you can see. So I regularly go through, maybe twice a year, pulling out seedlings of this plant, because otherwise it would just be almost 100% this euphorbia. But if you want a quick cover, that's a great one to put in, and then you can have other little treasures popping through it. As you can see, I've got here a lovely little glaucous purpley grass, nerines, all sorts of things. So this can be your sort of more instant one, and then you need to get a handle on it and control it. But I wouldn't want to be without it, but some people would say that's reckless planting that, particularly if you've got young children around. I wouldn't do it if I had young babies wandering around. So if you want to risk it, like me, go with it and use it, because you'll love it. My fourth one is a bit of an oddity. It's this wonderful umbellifera. I don't know what it is. I think someone must have dropped the seed here, or maybe I planted it years ago. And it does look a little bit like Ammi majus, but obviously it's got a much lighter head than Ammi. And it really pulls in the insects. I can see the hoverflies are busy at it all the time now, all sorts of things all over it. I do know it's a biennial because I saw the little leaves, the basal leaves, go up all through last year, and I thought, what is that? What is that? And with any weed, if I don't recognise the seedlings, I leave them, because you just don't know what they are. And I'm so glad I did in that case, and I walked around it, because it's produced this spectacular wonder. So never pull out a weed unless you know what it is. I'm just hoping now, with this wonderful amount of flowers, it's going to be setting its seeds all over the gravel, and we'll have it forever. If anyone knows what it is, please tell me, because I'd love to know. I don't like having people here that I don't know the names of. But my top favourite at the moment, this year, today, is definitely Cephalaria gigantea. Now, I love this. It's just got these wonderful scabious type flowers, and it's really airy. It's a giant, and people do grow it in borders, but I think in the gravel, where it's got the space to develop, it looks magnificent. And even if I only had a tiny gravel area, I wouldn't mind having a giant such as that, because I think because it's so light and upright, it holds its own, and it gives it that very important 3D effect, which I love in a small space. It always makes a small space look bigger. It does seed around. You can grow it from seed too, but it doesn't seed prolifically. And it's been in flower now probably for 2 months at least, so it's a long flower. But again, to prolong the flowering, every time I get a dead flower head, I cut it off. Now I do like the seed hedge. You get these lovely knobbles, these lovely round knobbly bits which look great, but I want to see the flowers for longer, and then when it's really coming to the end I'll let all the seeds develop, and then I'll have a wonderful show of knobbles, and that will be really nice. And then after the knobbles look a bit tatty, I'll come and cut it down to the basil foliage, and you get a bit of the basil foliage showing all the way through the earth. But I think it's a cracker. I think it's one of the nicest plants to grow. The bees, the hoverflies, they all love it, and I use it in many gardens. And with all these plants, all my top 5, they are my top 5 because they're easy to grow and they like a wide variety of situations. Most of them like sun, but most of them will cope with a bit of shade too. This is one of the mini projects that I've been working on during July, and it very much looks like work in progress at the moment. But the aim here is to form a growing arbour. Now, it started off life initially, I don't know how long ago, maybe 10 years ago, and I had a box ball either side of the end of the path with 2 bay standards behind it. Then I decided I'd actually like to form more of a statement at the end. So what I did is I pushed the pot into the end, and I planted it, as you see, with dahlias and things like that. And then I came across this arbour. So we've moved it into here, and it just about fits over the edge of the box. I had to cut them quite severely at the back to get it to fit over. So I've been tying in the backs of the bay to pull them across to form a solid back alcove, as it were. I put in a bamboo cane. I take 1 shoot from one direction, 1 from the other, and you tie them to either end of the bamboo cane, and then they will grow on to meet. And this is a very simple way that you do if you're forming a garden arch out of a beech or a hornbeam tree. I've done one over there for the polythene tunnel. Or if you're pleaching, when you're growing pleach trees, you have the verticals, and then you tie in the corresponding horizontals from each side to the cane, and then they pull right across and they form a solid wall. So it's a very simple process. It's fun to do, and you can make all sorts of things using that technique. I usually use this black flexi tubing, which is wonderful because it does stretch. So as the branches grow, it slightly gives and stretches, so it doesn't cut into them, and you don't need to be rigorous about coming and changing the ties. You can just leave this on. So I'm going to do that more now. I'm going to tie these higher bays that have now come up across so they link, and it might take me 12 months, it might even take me 2 years, but I don't mind that because I think in the end it will look fantastic. I've also been clipping it. I've taken the sides back quite a bit, but when I move the pot out this autumn, when the dahlias are finished, I'll really get in there and I'll really clip them back. And so I will make more room there, and I will make enough room so I can just get a very cozy bench for 2 in there. And that clipping is a process, and it's interesting to see how quickly plants recover from a really hard clip. So if you remember, in the May diary, I had a box hedge which was about almost waist height with me, and it was much too high. So I was brutal with it. I really hammered it. I hammered it back to just under 300 mil, a foot high. Some I took even lower, down to 6 inches, 150 mil high. But now I'm amazed because it's grown, and the bit that I took back to just under a foot is now almost totally covered with foliage. The bit that I cut lower is not quite so well covered, but it's growing back fast. So that's in just under 2 months we've had that amount of regrowth. So plants, hedging plants, are designed to respond to clipping, and when you clip them, i.e. renovation pruning or renovation clipping, and you really hammer them back, they do grow fast. So as ever, July's been a really busy month, not just keeping on top of all the weed growth and the plant growth generally, but creating exciting new artifacts. Always the most fun bit as far as I'm concerned.